Good evening from Vietnam. Thank you so much for spending your time and watching our Inside Sharing show. Joining the show today is Deborah, and then we have a privilege to bring her to the show. So, Deborah, thank you so much for spending your morning with Vivi and me and the audience of the show. And
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
thank you very much. And in our culture, the respectful way is for our speaker to share with our audience who you are and the work that you do. In brief, can you help us to share that?
I'd be happy to. So, professionally, I am a coach, consultant, speaker, and writer. I focus on leadership communication. So, whether that's helping leaders make better presentations, navigate difficult conversations, give and receive helpful feedback, engage in coaching conversations, that's what I do. And I do one on one executive coaching, I lead workshops. I teach at a few business schools, and I'm also a writer. So I'm a columnist for Harvard Business Review and Psychology Today. And I've written a few books. The last two books that I've written, Overcoming Overthinking and Go to Help, are two books that I actually wrote with my daughter, Sophie, who is currently in college.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, the works that you do are so amazing to us, especially for the works that you and your daughter Sophie to write the books together. So that's very fascinating. And Vivian and I always ask Vivian, maybe in the future we try to team up and write something up. So we start with the podcast together. It's a good start already, and then we expect something new together also. Heading into the future. Allow us to bring you all the way back to when you was young, okay? Because we always have dreams when we were kid, right? And you know when you were young, what did you dream that when you grow up, what kind of job you're gonna do, what kind of life you're gonna have? Can you share that with us,
Yeah,
Deborah?
I can. So I was quite clear that I was going to be a doctor. And not a general practitioner. I had a very specific field that I wanted to go into that didn't quite exist, although I think now it would be called dermatology. I wanted to be a doctor for splinters and paper cuts. And the reason that I wanted to be a doctor for splinters and paper cuts is that they are two injuries that look really small but hurt a disproportionate amount. Right? When you get a splinter, people are like, oh, that's nothing, but it hurts. Or a paper cut, it looks tiny, but it is mind-blowingly painful. And so I think I really cared about making sure that people had treatment for something that other people might minimize, but you knew hurt a lot. And unfortunately, when I went to college, I went into college pre-med, hoping to live this dream of being a splinter and paper cut doctor. And when I started taking organic chemistry, I said, this is awful. I am not willing to suffer through organic chemistry because I'm sure that what's on the other side of it is even less interesting to me. And so that's when I switched to being a major in psychology rather than pre-med. And I've often heard that organic chemistry is what separates the doctors from the psychologists.
Vivian, she got the degree in chemistry in chemistry engineering. So
Wow.
yes.
But I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
That
And
is
so
not a
if
doctor.
you're not a doctor, looks like you're good in the world anyway.
Yeah, Deborah, this is something that I really love to ask you about writing a book with your daughter. I think this is something, not a lot of people can do. So can you share with us about the story, who initiated that and how you keep that together for that long?
Absolutely. So let's start with the first book that we wrote, which was called Overcoming Overthinking, 36 Ways to Tame Anxiety for Work, School, and Life. So Sophie and I both have several diagnosed anxiety disorders, ranging from obsessive compulsive disorder to panic disorder, a whole mess of things, glorious mess of things. And Sophie had actually written a book by herself before we wrote a book together. So starting when she was in junior high school, she started writing a book called Don't Tell Me to Relax, One Teen's Journey to Survive Anxiety and How You Can Too. And that book was written by a teenager for teenagers and parents and camp counselors and educators. and it got an awful lot of recognition. She was invited to speak all over the place. She was invited to give a TED Talk. And the way that our book came together, I'm going to tell it the way Sophie would tell it, because Sophie will tell the truth. So after Sophie wrote her book, I got a call from an organization who reached out to me and said, I understand that you and your daughter wrote a book about anxiety together. Now, that was not the case, but I said, oh, yes? Why are you asking? And they said, well, if that's the case, we want to have you do a keynote speech. And I said, oh, yes, we have written a book together. So I reached Sophie and I said, Sophie, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we've got a keynote speech that we are due to give in 9 months. The bad news is I said we wrote a book together. So we got to write a book together. So it was born out of a little white lie, but we decided that we wanted to write a book together about all of the strategies that we use together and independently to help us manage everyday anxiety to even mental illness. So that's how the first book came out. And then the second book, which was called Go to Help, 31 Ways to Offer, Ask for, and Accept Help, came out of a few different things. So first of all, in the Overcoming Overthinking book, we have a little part in there about how important it is to have a wide range of ways to ask for help. People always want to solve problems, and solving problems is one way of helping, but it's certainly not the only way. Sometimes you need somebody to empathize with you or ask you questions or give you a pep talk. And so this is one chapter of the book that got a lot of interest from people. And so that was one of the reasons we wrote this book, was to take that one chapter and really blow it up. A second reason we wrote this book together was it was during COVID, and people were starting to realize you will not survive this if you don't ask for help. And help is anything from, asking for help to find a vaccination appointment when they were hard to come by, to I had to ask my neighbor for toilet paper. We ran out of toilet paper. And so help looked like all sorts of different things. And then the third reason we wrote this book is that my brother and my sister-in-law had a baby named Henry, my little nephew, who unfortunately passed away before his first birthday. And when everybody found out that he was really very sick and not going to survive, everybody wanted to help and nobody could help. There is no help for when you have a child who isn't going to survive. And it was so hard to see what happens when people want to help, and actually this isn't something for which you can help. And so those were the three things that inspired us to write this book.
Wow. We're sorry for what happened to Henry and to your brother and the sister-in-law. That's very unfortunate. And from that, it becoming the motivation for you and Sophie to write something together, so that there will be many people out there who struggle and willing, not knowing how to ask for help or even accepting, the help from other people. I think the part of asking is hard already, but accepting help is something that, is new to me also. I read on LinkedIn a lot. I read on books a lot about the power of asking for help, but then opening yourself up to accepting it, accepting the help from other people also is not easy. How can you share with us, what's the ideas of how we should be opening to accept helps from others?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So one of the things that I want to normalize is that starting at about age 7, we start to associate asking for help with it impacting our reputation, right? So starting when we're really young, we go, oh, if I say I don't know something or I can't do something by myself, people will think I'm weak. People will think I'm dumb, right? It will undermine my credibility. So I want to give everybody credit for the fact that if you are having trouble asking for help because you conflate asking for help with people thinking that you are weak or not credible or not smart, you've had this belief for decades and decades, right? I'm 50. So if I've been believing that since I'm 7, that's 43 years of wiring neural pathways in my brain associating those two things. So the first thing I want people to know is it is very normal for you to have trouble asking for help and accepting help. And so one of the things that we recommend is, in addition to recognizing that, we've got this wiring in our brains, is to recognize that a big part of it is also our mindset, right? The beliefs that we have about asking for help and accepting help, which could be anything from, I want to preserve my reputation, to other people are busy, I don't want to bother them, to nobody will do it the way I will do it, so I should just do it myself. Do you recognize any of those mindsets?
Yep.
Yeah, right? So those are really common. That being said, when you start to think about, one of the exercises that we ask people to do is to think about 5 people who you could call right now to help you, and they would say yes before they even ask, what do you need help with? Mm-hmm. Do you have 5 people that would help you no matter what it was?
Yep.
Yeah. And so when you think about those 5 people who would help you even before asking, what do you need help with? And you think about what they would think or say if they found out you needed help and you didn't ask them, they would be thinking, why didn't you ask me? I am here for you. You've helped me so many times. This is my opportunity to give it back to you. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Why suffer and struggle when you don't have to? So we ask people to adopt the mindset of their helpers. And when you adopt that mindset, you realize that people are wanting and waiting to help you. Mm. The people that you would ask for help hopefully will not judge you negatively for asking, but in fact will consider it flattering. Whenever anybody asks me for help, I am flattered that they ask me. That doesn't mean that I always can or should say yes, but I've never been insulted that somebody thought I could be helpful to them. Mm. And so it takes a little bit of trying on some new mindsets to help rechannel those neural pathways to get brave. It's really brave to ask for help. It's really going against our culture of what we've come to believe makes somebody successful. And it is entirely necessary for us to get better at anything.
Mm. The notion of showing vulnerabilities has been in out for a while already, Deborah. And since you've been working with a lot of executives, a lot of leaders, right? Do you see that they have been starting to embrace, in themselves to ask for help and like that?
So I think COVID was a real game changer for folks. And as I mentioned before, because of COVID, we had to ask for help in ways that we never could have anticipated. From, could you help me start a home office, to, could you help me figure out how to teach my kids while also working, right? Mm-hmm. So things we never thought we would need help with became normal asks. And I think that helped, right? That there was no way we could do it ourselves. And I think that was helpful. I think a big part of it is sort of personal culture and organizational culture. Mm. So in our research, we found that around the world, asking for help looked very different. And even in your own country, I'm here in America, which is a very ethnically, and racially diverse country. There are some populations where asking for help outside your family could bring shame to your family. Right? And so, excuse me. So you've got to be mindful that there are lots of different cultural nuances about asking for help, and different workplaces treat it differently. So some workplaces really believe we help each other, we are a team, and some workplaces actually negatively reward you for asking for help and make it seem like you should have known to do this on your own. True.
Since you talk about the personal culture and organizational culture, I'm always intrigued to ask this question to you regarding to you and Sophia's work together. And we've been having a
Mm-hmm.
lot of organization promoting, like inclusion, diversities, right? And speaking of the lady like Sophia, is young, dynamic in the next level of generation with different expectation, backgrounds, ambitions, and things like that. And you as the mother, and have a different set of expectation, expertise, and experiences. When you guys work together, how can you make that organization of Deborah and Sophie to work collaboratively well together though?
Yeah. So first of all, that was the most polite way of calling me old I've ever heard. So thank you. I like how you framed it as a different set of expectations. I was like, he just called me old, and that was very, very flattering. So,
I call wise.
so and yes, thank you. Very seasoned and very wise. So, yes, so Sophie and I work really well together. While we do bring different perspectives and different experiences, one of the reasons that we work very well together is that we hold ourselves accountable and hold one another accountable. So we take our commitments to ourselves and to each other very seriously. We don't let each other off the hook just because we're family or related. And I think when you are working with people who hold accountability as a given, I think it can be very, very helpful. But in addition to us having that similarity, we also have different strengths and interests. So as we were writing Go to Help, I really wrestled with the planning process, and Sophie was like, we got to trust the process and just keep going. And then in the actual writing of it, because I have many more decades on me and many more examples of using these skills in the workplace, in the family life, I think I was outpacing Sophie in the writing of it just because I have more decades of examples. And so I would support her in the writing of it and remind her that she has valid experiences even in her 20 years to bring forth. And then when it went to the editing of it, Sophie's real expertise is around proofreading, right? Like catching things that I would never see. And my expertise was looking at it from the big picture, saying, this really needs some research. This is starting to get too sad. We need to add some levity or lightness to it. And so we were able to balance each other in really important ways to have a good finished product.
Deborah,
and we both, regardless of age, we are both very, very motivated by ice cream. So we would know when we were having a hard day that we would say, all right, at the end of this, there's going to be ice cream, and we would plan what flavors we were going to get, what toppings we were going to get. And, we may be complex, but in some ways we're really just very simple, and we are motivated by ice cream.
Good that we have some motivation. You guys having some motivation together. Having ice cream as a source of fixing every issue that you guys might have during the day, right? There will be a lot of people out there, a lot of people like me, like Vivian, always also want to have works together with somebody that we hold dear to our lives. Okay, so not speaking of the team that we are working at organization, but now it's individual, personalized teams that we want to have in our lives, right? And definitely there will be times and that you both have disagreement, you don't share the ideas together. How do you set that up front so that disagreement can be managed from the beginning and throughout the whole process, and still hold people accountable for the works that the two of you are doing?
Yeah, and I think disagreement takes a lot of shapes, and one of the shapes that we tend to underestimate is that if you do not have disagreement, you probably have no diversity of opinions, right? And so for most projects to be better, it will be better if you have a diversity of opinions and welcome it as productive conflict. So productive conflict is conflict that achieves an outcome, right? We got to something good or better than either of us would have, and we take care of the relationship. So we check in with each other to see how people are feeling before, during, and after. And so I think if you can frame productive conflict as something that will make the work better and maybe even make the relationship better, that can be helpful. It's also really important for people to speak up early and often when something feels like it is impacting their ability to share freely, their ability to contribute equally. If you have open and frequent conversations about that, that means that conflict doesn't have sort of enough longevity to take you off course as well. It's also really important to create a culture of feedback where we are regularly giving each other feedback. So that is something that Sophie and I did throughout both books, was to say, hold on one second, I feel like you're pushing me to do something that I'm not comfortable doing, or, I'm getting worried. You said this would be done at this time. I'm getting worried because we're getting close to it. Could you at least let me know when it's going to be there? And so those lines of communication were really open. I will also share that, my son Jacob, who is a twin to Sophie, twin in many ways and also very different in many ways, he and I often don't see things eye to eye, right? We do, and then sometimes we don't. And we have figured out a really, really healthy way of communicating with each other, which is the importance of considering the other person's perspective and saying that out loud, right? So he and I will see something really different, and I'll say, look, I want to make sure that I'm understanding your perspective and that that I'm considering your perspective. And then I'll articulate it back to him. And he will typically agree that I understood it and that I've considered it, even if I don't see it the same way. And he will say the same thing to me. I think we're seeing this through a really different perspective. And to be able to do that with my 21-year-old kid, to me, feels like a huge gift in our relationship.
Is that because of the background that you had as a psychologist major?
No.
No.
I wish I could say that was from the background that I had as a psychology major. No, these are things actually that I learned in coaching school. These are things that I learned through teaching conflict and navigating difficult conversations. I think these are skills that I did not have as a kid or a young adult. These are skills that I've developed in my wisdom years.
And Vivian, you seem to have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Deborah. It's beautiful to have this kind of relationship. Something similarly complementing, and then something different to grow or to be together. And I think it's very difficult for our culture where the older generations always hold power to control everything. So if you can give us a few advice, would you please share how we can improve ourselves as a parent and how we take care our generations? The generation gap, the communications and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw out a couple of ideas. This is certainly not an area of expertise for me, talking about generation gaps, especially when it's around a cultural norm. So, the first thing that I would say is to, honor the tradition, right? Honor what the tradition of adults and elders being respected, making decisions. Definitely give credit to all of the things that has allowed your culture to create. And you can honor and respect that while also acknowledging the perspective of the younger generation who may want more autonomy, independence, and choice, right? And to see the benefits of that as well. That strikes me as a really good place for a first conversation, is acknowledging that both approaches, and that's sort of binary, it's not a both, it's a range of approaches, have merit, and to open up the conversation about, what would you like to be different and why, and to talk about what about that may be a little bit hard for you, and to be honest where you're willing to flex and where you're not. So it reminds me a little bit of, one of the things that we've seen really explode in the last few years are people understanding that they have a range of pronouns that they can use, right? That there are pronouns that they can use that make them feel more like themselves. And the people who have been with them for years are having a really hard time when somebody is a them, but before that they were a her or or a him. And so I think it's similar to that, which is I have been wired for years and years to call you her or she, and I am committed to calling you them because that's who you are. And it's going to take a little time. It feels really new for me, and I recognize that it's important to you.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Deborah. One more question. One day, organic chemistry will be moved away. Would you still consider a doctor of center and paper cut?
No, I'm so squeamish. I cannot, when my family and I watch something on television, if there is any kind of blood, I put my head under a pillow and I say, let me know when it's over. So I don't think I'd be very good. I don't think my patients would appreciate me operating on them with a pillow over my face.
Deborah, I have two clients of mine who's executive leaders in big MNCs in here. They ask you this question. They would like to know the secret that you build the seed for success to Sophie. And when Sophie grow up, what did you do that make her wrote the book on herself and do a lot of public speakings and so successful at her age? Is that coming from her ends, motivation, aspirations, or you and Michael had done something in the background to help her to grow and to show her the how to to navigate her through that directions?
So I think for both Jacob and Sophie, it's a combination of both. So number one, let me just start by saying number one, my kids were born into privilege, right? My kids are born, white, upper middle class, in a safe suburban neighborhood with access to schools, with no illnesses, or disabilities slowing them. I mean, they had everything they could possibly have that set them up for success. So I want to first acknowledge that's 99% right there. Okay. And then, yes, my husband and I certainly were there to support them, teach them, coach them, step back, give them opportunities to experiment with things that they felt interested in, and then hopefully role modeled some things in our own lives. And then everything else from both of my kids was self-motivated, self-generated. And so I want to acknowledge the role that privilege has. I want to acknowledge the role that modeling has, and I want to acknowledge the role that our kids were told, go do anything that you want to do. You need to be able to support yourself, right? And it should be something that you are interested in. Worry about that more than anything else. And we're not saying go follow your passion. We're saying it should be something that you think you'll continue to be curious about, because that will probably satisfy you until you find something else that you're curious about. So we'll take a little bit of the credit, but a lot of it came from a bunch of other things.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That leads me to another question, Deborah. For the years that you've been working on helping leaders and coaching them, right? We have a lot of friends or people that we know also very successful at work, and they've been coaching, mentoring, and teaching others, but they are not able to absorb what the knowledge that they gain through the works to bring home and make home a beautiful environment for and a beautiful garden at home. How did you absorb all that skill, all that experience from the outside and bring that inside so you have fruitful conversation with Jacob and build up the competency for the family and your children there?
Yeah, so that's first of all, thank you for the complimentary observation. And number two, thank you for the very accurate conversations that all of us who are expert thought leaders, all of these things, are great at doing it with our clients, and we have a lot of trouble bringing it home. So there are some things that I bring home, and there are other things that I'm helping my clients with, where anybody looking at me would be like, Deb, why don't you try that yourself? So I'm like every other coach, where there are things I'm helping my clients with that I have just not even recognized I need to be doing myself. But in terms of the communication piece, right, helping leaders communicate and helping my family communicate, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of trial and error. And I don't think there's anything in my life that's more important than that, right? So you hope the idea is, what you focus on will grow. And so I focus on creating a healthy family life because it is the most important thing to me.
Wow. Thank you. The book has been introduced for 5 months now, right? I think the new 5 months. Is there any? I always like to know, what's in the future that you are about to do that you want to share with Vivian and I, the audience of the show, so we can celebrate with you in advance.
Oh, thank you. Well, so yes, Go to Help has been out for 5 months. I didn't even think about that. So thank you for reminding me of the anniversary. Sophie and I, independently and together, will continue to be giving keynotes and workshops and webinars about how to get better at asking for help, how to get better at offering help, which is something we believe every leader needs to know how to do, and not just leaders, but parents and partners. And we have been told by our publisher that we are not to write another book for 5 years. So I think we're now down to 4 years and 7 months, 8 months. This is our baby for the next few years, and I think we're just curious and excited to see who's interested in it. We were very, very honored to be able to bring the subject of how to get better at asking for help to the United States Homeland Security first responders. So people who respond to bomb threats and school shootings and all of those things. Their job is to help everybody else, and they don't do a great job at taking help themselves. And so that was one of the things that we were so honored to be able to participate in, because that felt meaningful and very important.
Wow. We're excited to see how that we go. If you in the future, when you get it ready, can you share with us so that we can celebrate with you together?
Of course. Of course.
And Deborah, I have a last question for you today.
Yes.
And if you look at your years of living and working and helping others, right, coaching people, what the secrets that create the success that you are having today?
My number one secret is to choose the right partner.
Wow.
Right. So, I couldn't have done any of this without the support, every kind of support from my husband, Michael. And by the way, choosing the right partner for some people may be choosing no partner, right? That's totally fine as well. But make sure that whoever it is that you have to support you in your life is really, truly supportive. So that's number one. Number two is there is no substitute for doing hard work. Number three is, I think one of the differentiators that I found between me and some of my other colleagues is I don't see anybody as competition. And I don't mean that in like, oh, nobody could compete with me. And that's not what I mean. What I mean is everybody is a potential collaborator, helper, somebody I can learn from, somebody who can learn from me. And so in the early days of networking, when people would go to events and they would hear what I did and they're like, well, I do the same thing, so I don't really need to meet you. I had a very different perspective, which is if we do the same thing, we should definitely meet each other because you know things I don't know. I know things you don't know. And one day there's going to be a piece of work that you can't do, but I can, or there's a piece of work I can't do, but you can. And so that being very professionally generous has served me very well.
Wow. Thank you for sharing the secret of your success. And we are so intrigued to see you and Michael in September when you guys traveling to this region.
I hope so. I really hope that happens. It would be so lovely to get together in person.
Yep, that would be so lovely to see you in person too. So thank you so much for spending your morning with me, with Vivian, and the audience of the show. We really appreciate that. We really admire all the works that you guys have been doing, and we look for more, more exciting things coming from you and Deborah, from Sophie, Jacob, and Michael. And we wish you well. We wish you all the best. Okay, and
To you as well. Much health and happiness.
thank you very much. Have a beautiful day there. Happy June to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you, Vivian.